Well, welcome to this video and a warm welcome back to Major Tom Haviland. Major, thank you for coming back again.
Well, thanks, Dr. Campbell, for having me back on the show again. We met about a year or so ago and talked about the results of my 2023 Worldwide Embalmer Blood Clot Survey, and I've just finished up the one for this year to see what the embalmers are seeing through the year 2024.
Indeed, and you are basically an independent researcher, but you're a quantitative analyst. And so this is what we're looking at, these, well, what appears to be still mysterious white clots. But the reason that I'm so pleased that Tom has come on is he's collected hard data. So what we're going to look at now are real numbers, and then we'll probably look at some qualitative data towards the end as well.
This is, like I said, the third annual survey I've done. And the first survey that we did back in to see what the embalmers were seeing through the end of 2022, we had 179 responses to that survey. Last year, we've got 269 responses to that survey. This year, we've topped that, and we've got 301 responses to this year's survey. So we're going in the right direction. I would still like to have a lot more responses than that. One of the things that actually perplexed me this year, John, about the survey was my best performer from last year, the Funeral Director Association of Pennsylvania. They did not participate in this year's survey, and last year they were a big participant, my best participant with 130 responses. And what's really perplexing about that, the fact they did not participate this year, is that their president actually sent me an email saying that he, has seen the clotting problems himself. Let me read you what he said. He said, "Hey, Tom, I'll see what I can do." And he's talking about trying to get his board of execs to approve the distribution of the survey to their embalmers. He said, "I was one of the embalmers who responded to the survey last year regarding the clot situation. So I do recognize this to be a current situation. I see this email, a colleague of his, and he and I do quite a bit of chatting together about it, and I do help their firm when he's away, so I do see the same things he's experiencing. More concerning for me is the poor distribution I've been experiencing to the extremities, clots aside. Nearly every person that I embalm is not getting good distribution to one or both of the hands below the elbow, something I have not seen in the past." So what I thought was interesting about that, Dr. Campbell, is, they've decided not to participate in this year's survey when their own president is seeing unusual clotting. So I was disappointed by that. And it just goes to show there's still this reluctance on the part of many of the embalmer funeral director associations to participate in the survey. Now, the good news is that other states this year, like Florida, Louisiana, Tennessee, Texas, and Utah, picked up the slack and actually provided more responses than we got from Pennsylvania last year. In fact, the Tennessee Funeral Directors Association, they've actually invited me next summer, John, to speak in front of their entire membership at their annual conference to present the results of my 3 worldwide embalmer blood clot surveys. And they
I do hope you're taking some forms for them to fill out so you can collect a mass of data when you go there, Tom.
I will do that.
Yeah.
And they've actually, I've submitted my 2 previous surveys to them, and I'll do the same for this third one, and they're actually getting that approved to be part of continuing education points for their embalmers. So I'm happy to see that at least some of the embalmer associations and funeral director associations around the country are starting to pay attention to this. So that's a good thing.
Yeah.
In the first survey that we did back in 2022, there were 3 main results. The embalmers responding to that survey were 67% of the embalmers responding to that survey. Exactly two-thirds said they were seeing the white fibrous clots. And they were seeing them in an average of 30% of their corpses, which was really shocking.
This is 2020 what?
2022, at the end of 2022.
Yeah.
And then another thing is the main consensus was they started seeing this phenomenon in 2021, after the rollout of the medical interventions. So those were the 3 main results of that first survey. Last year, in the survey that we did at the end of 2023, the embalmers, 73% of the embalmers said they were seeing the white fibrous clots. So it went up from 67% to 73%, and they were seeing them in an average of 20% of their corpses. So that went down from 2023, it was 30%, then it went down to 20% in 2023. So that was good. And we thought that might be an indication of the Bradford Hill criteria of reversibility As you know, if the medical interventions are causing this, we suspected that maybe as you get further and further away from people taking their last medical interventions way back in 2021, that you might start to see less of the phenomenon in corpses going forward. And that's what the embalmers saw. We also asked questions, if you remember last year, about microclotting as well. And about 80% of the embalmers said they were seeing that phenomenon, and an average of about 25% of their corpses. So these phenomena, we've confirmed that they're not rare occurrences. These things are prevalent. So, and then
the microclotting would have occurred before 2022 and 2021. It's just that it occurred more.
Correct.
It was more prevalent, whereas the white clots basically were unseen prior to 2020.
That's correct, John. Yeah, prior to 2020 and COVID and the vaccines, the microclotting had been seen in corpses prior to 2019 and prior.
A recognized phenomena that just became more common.
But yes, exactly. And less than 5% of their corpses prior to COVID, but now, all of a sudden a quadrupling or quintupling of that phenomenon in the COVID years. So, and then we'd also asked a couple questions last year, if you remember, about infant deaths, and about a fourth of the embalmers said they were seeing an increase of about 20 to 25% in infant deaths. And then we also asked about age stratification as well, and the embalmers said they were seeing these unusual clotting effects in all age groups, primarily in those 36 years old and up. So that was the kind of the results of the first two surveys. So we went back this year and we asked more questions again about the white fibrous clots and the microclotting. And as you'll see on the slides, we also asked some questions about the embalmers, are they talking to other embalmers? Are they talking to their associations about these things? Because, like I said, we've been seeing a kind of a reluctance to do so. So here on question 2, we basically asked again this year in 2024, have you seen the white fibrous clots? And look at that, John. 250 out of the 301 embalmers responding to this survey this year said they are indeed still seeing these white fibrous clots. So it's been up.
So it's actually gone up. So
it's gone up.
This was what time period was this, Tom? Is this for the whole year?
For the whole year of 2024, right? During the year 2024. Yeah. So Richard Hirschman and I have a couple of reasons why we think this might be happening. First of all, it could be that clots are becoming more prevalent, but we don't think that's happening. We actually think what's really happening is there is probably less of a stigma now for the embalmers to admit this phenomenon's happening, as they see it now into its 4th year, and they know from our previous surveys that more embalmers are starting to admit that these clots do exist. And as you know, I just sent you within the last week or so a couple of photos that Richard Hirschman took clots out of corpses in November and December of this year. So it's still happening. So then, obviously, if we go to the next question, you can see.
So this is question 3.
Yeah, how prevalent that the clots were. As you can see there, 27.5% of the corpses in 2024 contained the white fibrous clots. If you look over there, that's including the 43 embalmers that said they saw none. So even if you average those all in, you get a weighted average of 27.5% of the corpses containing the white fibrous clots in 2024. And that's up from 20% last year in 2023. So that kind of put a little dent in my Bradford Hill criteria theory of reversibility, because I was hoping to see the percentage of clots go down as we got further and further away from the medical interventions to something more like 10%. But it actually went up this year.
So 98 embalmers were seeing these white fibrous clots in between 1 and 20% of their patients.
Correct.
And 74 embalmers were seeing it in 21 to 40% of their patients.
Yes. And then if you look further on, 55 of the embalmers between 41 to 60%. So if you do a weighted average of all those, you get 27.5%. Now,
I did talk to a well-known embalmer in the UK just before we came on today. And he's seeing about 40%.
40%. Isn't that shocking, John? I mean, that's startling, isn't it?
So he'd be in that 41 to 60% bracket, roughly.
Yeah, and to remind your audience, like we said earlier, they never saw this phenomenon prior to 2020.
This is a completely new phenomenon. This is a completely post-2020 phenomena.
Yeah.
And as far as I'm aware, it hasn't been published in any journals of pathology yet, which is I just find the inconsistency between the embalmer's findings and the pathologist's findings very difficult to understand.
It's very perplexing. Like I said, the funeral director associations don't want to talk about it. Vascular surgeons and cath lab workers don't want to talk about it either.
And I mean, of course, the processes of post-mortem autopsy that the pathologist would be involved in and the processes of embalming are completely different. So in embalming, you're washing out the whole circulatory system. Therefore, if there was any white clots present, they're going to be flushed out with the blood that's flushed out of the body. But pathologists don't do that, of course. They're just interested in the main organ groups. So it's understandable to an extent, but it still surprises me that there's been no reports I'm aware of in the pathologist journals. Have you seen any in the pathology journals, Tom?
I have not, Dr. Campbell. I have not. So it's and we know that there's when things are controversial, they have a hard time getting published sometimes.
It's difficult to explain.
Yeah.
And again, part of the fact that more are being seen here could be a higher index of suspicion amongst embalmers now that this is more widely known.
And keep in mind, again, like I said, the mix of embalmers that took the survey this year is different than last year. The last year's survey was weighted heavily by the Pennsylvania embalmers. This year I had different states. So this could actually be this 27.5% could be a number down for them, right? If those people had answered last year, they may have said that they saw the clots in 40% of their corpses. So then it could be a reduction to 27.5% this year.
I mean, we can't possibly know that, but we certainly hope that it's a downward trend because. And we still don't know whether this is a peri-death phenomena or an entirely post-mortem phenomena. There's so many unanswered questions about this.
Well, the embalmers I talked to, Dr. Campbell, are pretty convinced it's happening prior to death for two reasons. First of all, they're picking up corpses that are only an hour or two old, and they're finding them riddled with the clots. And they say there's no way that those clots could have formed in just the hour or two since the person passed with no refrigeration. And then secondly, myself and a Dr. Philip McMillan over in the UK, who runs the Vision Health Channel, we both have found whistleblowers here in the United States that work in cath labs. Mine's an endovascular specialist and cardiologist, and he says he's been seeing the white fibrous clots and pulling them out of patients, living patients, for the last several years.
Yeah, so the trouble is there's nothing published on that. This is the frustrating thing about this.
Yes,
we can't base. I don't doubt the guy's word at all, but we can't base it on anonymous anecdotal evidence. We need something in the journals. This is the frustrating thing here. I know you share this frustration.
I think that the government should actually subpoena these doctors to come forward and that may actually.
There's a new administration coming in, Tom. Who knows what's going to happen? Yeah,
that actually the doctors might actually like that because that might provide them some protection against having any retribution for being a whistleblower.
I think that's likely.
Right.
I suspect we're going to find out within the next year what's going on here because of the more open approach to medical information that we're hoping for.
I'm very hopeful as well with
the next administration.
Jr. and in HHS, and then Dr. Jay Bhattacharya becoming the head of NIH.
Yeah.
Yes, we're seeing a new administration, and I'm hopeful too, Doctor.
Yeah, we're hopeful. Okay, should we go to the next slide, Tom?
Yeah. The next question I asked because of the
slide 4.
Yeah, the confusion that we just had about the last one about what's really happening. So I said to the embalmers, "Hey, did you see the white fibrous clots in a higher percentage or a lower percentage of your corpses than you did last year?"
So this is the trend,
right? And you see, it's the longest bar there is 155, say about the same.
Yeah.
But you can see 59 said less clots in 2024. 47 those said more clots in 2024. So it all kind of balances out and averages out to about the same. So that's the conclusion I drew from that slide. Some of the embalmers in their comments, by the way, said, I haven't been keeping very good track, but I'm going to start keeping track like Richard Hirschman does of his corpses in terms of when they get the white fibrous clots. Richard actually tallies them, so he knows exactly what percentage he's seeing. And for Richard, by the way, it has been about the same that your embalmer said. About 40% of his corpses the last 12 months have had the white fibrous clots. So hopefully the embalmers will start doing a little bit better job of tracking that number.
Well, I mean, every time we do these videos, hopefully another couple of dozen embalmers will hear about it.
And they do. In fact, I actually get contacted by sometimes, that said, "Hey, I've seen your interviews with Dr. Campbell, and I'll volunteer information." So that's a good thing.
And bounce it on to your fellow embalmers as well. We just want to collect as much information and data on this as we can.
Exactly. Question 5.
Slide 5. Yeah.
We asked, do other embalmers that you talk to say that they're seeing the large white fibrous clots? This is where I'm starting to get into the psychology of the embalmers a little bit and the associations, trying to figure this out. As you see there, the yes bar is long, right? 185 of the embalmers do talk to other embalmers, and the other embalmers are saying they are seeing the clots. And as you see there, only 50 said no. What's interesting there at the bottom, you see 66 of the embalmers said, we don't talk about this.
Yes.
Why are they not interested, or are they scared? Why wouldn't they want to talk to their other embalmers about this?
It's almost like, you and me know in the current climate, Tom, there's things we're not supposed to talk about. No one's written it down and says, thou shalt not talk about this.
Yeah.
Just in previous administrations or current administrations in the world, you're not allowed to criticize the leadership.
But it's just an indication that they do talk to each other for the most part in private.
So this is what I call coffee room chat. This is the sort of thing you talk about over coffee, isn't it, when you're having a break?
Yeah. God bless the few embalmers like Richard Hirschman and John O'Looney in your country that have come forward and they talk about this. And they've been much maligned for what they've said, too. The people come at them, but they have the bravery to do that. And, just think if like I said, this year's survey, 83% of the embalmers said they're seeing the white fibrous clots. Yeah. Wouldn't you think, how different would things be now, Dr. Campbell, if those people had all come forward 3 years ago to let us know what they were seeing? Yeah. Maybe a certain product would have been taken off the market by now. That's all I'm saying.
And it would be really nice to get, well, ideally all of the embalmers in the world to fill out this form. The better the data.
Correct.
There's no obvious reason to think that this is not representative.
Yeah.
Okay, should we go on to question 6?
We asked again about the microclotting this year. Yeah. We said, did you observe any of the microclotting? With the embalmers, they call it coffee grounds or dirty blood.
Yeah, it's very small blood clots that occur.
Yeah, and about the same number of embalmers this year, or same percentage, 78% said they were seeing the microclotting in 2024.
Yeah.
We're ready for the next slide.
And again, this is up from the previous, the 2020 and previous
right.
year's numbers. Yeah.
And if you look at that note there, you're correct. Embalmers used to see microclotting in 2019 and the years prior, and less than 5% of their corpses prior to the years of, and particularly in patients or corpses that had gone through heavy chemotherapy. But so this is, if you look there, the average for the 2024 is 22%. If you average all those bars together, including the 52 embalmers over there in the green that said they saw none, you get microclotting still in 22% of corpses in 2024. And then this one is down slightly from the 25% that we recorded in last year. So that's following the Bradford Hill criteria of reversibility, that I expected to see.
And prior to this, we think it was about 5% of corpses had dirty blood.
Right. So as we know, this can be just as dangerous a phenomenon as the white fibrous clots we think are causing strokes and heart attacks. The microclotting is just as dangerous because it occurs at the capillary level and blocks off the exchange of oxygen at the lungs, and then they carry that oxygen to all the major organs of the body, including brain, eyes, all over the place.
And as well as that, the microclots that come out in the embalming process could have been bigger clots that have been broken up by the pressure, the hydrostatic pressures generated by the embalming process. Yes.
So, we're seeing the white fibrous clots, like I said, this year in 27.5% of corpses, the embalmers are. They're seeing the microclotting in 22% of their corpses. Yeah. I think last year you had remarked, well, there's no reason why these percentages might not be a representation of our population as a whole, right? I don't know if you recall saying that. And I agree with you. It makes me think about what percentage of the population walking around right now may have these white fibrous clots and microclotting going on inside.
This is what I struggle with, Tom. I mean, if you had those kind of clots, say in your femoral artery, your leg would go black and drop off. You know, we're talking about massive pathologies here.
Yeah. Well, you're right.
So something's not adding up. You know, to me, it's pointing largely to a peri-death phenomena, but we simply need more information on that.
We need more information. I'm of the belief that the clots are small enough as they're growing that blood can still flow around them, and you feel fine. You may not feel any symptoms at all, but then it gets to the point where it finally then occludes a vessel. And then that's when you have trouble, right? When it grows large enough.
I don't know. I mean, if the vessel was partly occluded, you'd expect what we call ischemic changes.
Right. Well, and people have noticed things like fatigue, like that shortness of breath, brain fog. We're getting symptoms out there that could be representative of people that are not getting good oxygen exchange or good blood flow. And we've seen an awful lot of increase over the last 3 or 4 years in deep vein thrombosis, pulmonary embolisms.
Yeah, that's true.
And people, and my blood clot survey that we talked about a month ago, recall that some people died from the clot, but then there were other people that had the clot successfully removed. Some had clots that were actually broken up by TPA, and clot busting drugs. Yeah. And then so people have various outcomes.
The clot busting drugs would only break up the red clots. It wouldn't break up the white ones.
Yeah, that's from talking to the vascular surgeon I was the cardiologist, endovascular specialist that I was in touch with. Most of the time, these white fibrous clots, they have to go in with flexible catheters that either scrape the clot out, lasso it out, or they suck it out.
Correct. So it wouldn't respond to thrombolysis.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. So moving on to question 8.
Question 8. Have you ever watched any online videos such as Died Suddenly, YouTube, etc., like your interviews with me, or read articles concerning the large whitish fibrous clots? This one kind of surprised me too, John, because of the 301 people that answered the survey, only about a third of them said they've been watching these kind of things, and whereas 205, 2/3 said they have not.
You'd think there'd be more curiosity than that, really, wouldn't you? If they're seeing them.
Yes.
If there's something I don't understand or can't do, I go to YouTube to get the video. Like you can't change the battery in your clicky thing for your car. So you go onto YouTube and it tells you how to do it.
What even in last year and this year, when I called a lot of these here in the United States, the State Funeral Director Association presidents, and I would ask them often, have you watched Died Suddenly? A lot of them said they have never watched Died Suddenly, and it's just like, wow. That was done back in November of 2022. Yeah. It's like, don't you? I'm sure they're hearing about this phenomenon. Wouldn't you think that they would want to have some curiosity in what's happening in their own profession? It just shocks me.
Yeah, you really would. I don't see any reasons why embalmers should be intrinsically less curious than pathologists. I mean, it's what they do all day, every day, isn't it? It's
yeah. So let's look at the next question.
No obvious explanation there. Question 9.
We asked the embalmers, are you a member of a professional embalmer or funeral director association? You see the vast majority are. Over 80% are members of a funeral director or embalmer association.
As you would expect.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that takes me to the next slide. The reason I asked that question is the next slide.
Question 10.
Yeah. I said, has your professional embalmer or funeral director association ever discussed the large whitish fibrous structures clots? Look at that. Look at that yes bar. Only 52 out of the 301 embalmers said, that's less than 20%, John, have said that their associations ever talked about these things, either in a annual meeting or a monthly newsletter or a quarterly newsletter. Again, I'm shocked about it, especially in light of the fact that 83% of the embalmers say they're seeing the white fibrous clots. You would expect.
There's much more chit chat from embalmer to embalmer than there is from professional association to embalmer.
Correct. In fact, that reminds me that this year again, in your own country, the British Institute of Embalmers declined to take the survey for the second year in a row, and it's just like, I don't get it. Especially, I know one of their own members. He's brought it up at their annual meetings. He specifically said, "Hey, are we going to take this survey that this U.S. Air Force major retired has been sending out, to our embalmer membership?" And they said at the meeting, they said they would take it up in their executive council So they didn't decide at the annual meeting in front of all the embalmers. They took it to their executive council, and then they decided no. so it's, like the embalmers don't get a say. The membership doesn't.
There's no confidentiality issue because it would be completely anonymous, Tom, wouldn't it?
Well, yeah. Again, the question I ask basically are: what are you seeing? When did you see it? And how much are you seeing? What percentage of the corpses?
You can't relate this to a particular funeral home.
Yeah, exactly. So there's no privacy concerns here that are being breached. Yeah, strange.
Very strange.
Yeah.
Right. So I think we're going on to some embalmers' comments. So where did you get these comments from, Tom?
Yeah, at the end of all three of our surveys we've done each year, John, we always allow the embalmers, and it's optional. They don't have to respond if they don't want to, but we want to give an opportunity to tell us more about what they're seeing or not seeing in the embalming room as they're doing their embalmings. So I've got
this is important because what we've looked at so far is quantitative data.
Right. So
now this is qualitative data, and that gives us an opportunity to triangulate.
Right. And remember, again, I never mentioned in the questions the words COVID or COVID vaccine. However, a lot of the embalmers in their comments, they talk about it, even though I've never mentioned it in the questions.
I mean, viewers may speculate on the cause of this, Tom. I couldn't possibly comment.
That's right. So we're going to read a few of what the embalmers.
Yeah, let's do. Yeah, let's go for it. So Georgia, yeah.
Yeah, the state of Georgia. Majority of the cases of decedents I've embalmed who present the large white fibrous clots were in the age range from late 50s to early 70s. Microclotting and grape jelly type clotting have been observed almost on every case who have hospitalized prior to death. So I thought that was interesting. I would have expected more clotting in the people in their 80s and 90s. That 50s to 70s looks a little young for me.
The grape jelly clots are bigger blood clots, which you could see those normally in the embalming process, couldn't you?
Yes, and embalmers have, and for years prior to COVID.
Yeah.
But they've noticed during the years of COVID and the vaccines that the grape jelly clots are more like grape jam now. They've become a little bit more viscous. Yeah.
The qualitative change.
Now that last statement there that he makes about, in almost every case who have hospitalized prior to death, that makes me tend to believe, is it possible then that the microclotting and the grape jelly clotting is the cause of the death in this person?
Or the cause of the hospitalization, at least, yeah.
Right. Here's another one from the state of Kentucky. I've been an embalmer since the early 2000s for an embalming service. I've never seen anything like this before the spring of 2021. I have experienced the white fibrous clots that have stretched out to 20 inches. It's like battling a rubber band. My right hand and elbow has suffered from these clots. I've been saying for the last 3 years, this isn't normal. I've recently spoken with a physician that has been hearing this in his field. We are in the same agreement in that we feel we know where this has come from. I think they're talking about a certain medical intervention there. But
who knows? But it's interesting. This is what they're seeing.
Yeah, what's interesting about it, he's confirming again previous data that we've collected. He said for him it started in 2021, and that's what the majority of the embalmers said in my very first survey.
Yeah, over half a meter in length. Yeah,
and then of course he mentions that not only has he seen it, but he knows a physician that says that he's seen it and is in the living as well. So that's interesting, I think.
It is indeed.
Yeah. All right.
Canada.
Next slide. Yeah, here we go. All right, here's one from Canada. He has a little bit of a different attitude, Dr. Campbell. Since the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic, which I assume this survey is pertaining to, I have not noticed any clots, fibrous structures, or contents in the blood outside of the ordinary. It is also not our responsibility as embalmers to take note of these cases, record or share any information as it is confidential medical information that breaches the privacy clause we have with our client families. Videos and articles such as Died Suddenly are anti-vaccine, COVID-denying propaganda that is based in no actual fact other than to spread right-wing beliefs and fear-mongering in the public. So this person definitely has an opinion. What do you think of that, Dr. Campbell?
It would appear that they are accepting the official government narrative and perhaps are less analytical and curious than you would normally hope. I agree it's not the embalmer's responsibility, but surely there would be a curiosity there.
You see, I actually take issue with that statement because I think that it is an embalmer's responsibility to bring this serious issue to the attention of the authorities. If you're Richard Hirschman, he wrestled with that because he knows.
It's true, actually. If someone was admitted with a heart attack and the embalmer found a bullet hole in the stomach,
right?
Then presumably, I don't know the embalmer's code, but presumably they'd have to report that to the authorities.
In fact, according to Richard Hirschman, if they find like a bullet wound or a stab wound, they have a legal obligation to let the police know that.
Yeah, or any evidence of potential foul play.
Correct. So I think that like I said, Richard wrestled with this himself. He knows there's a privacy to the embalming room, but he also felt an obligation to himself, to humanity, that it's ethical for him to report these unusual white fibrous clots because he thinks it could be a serious threat to humanity. So that's what led him and John O'Looney and those others to come forward and talk about this. They wrestle with it because they understand the privacy of the embalming room. But as long as you're not talking about specific people, you're just mentioning, I've seen this phenomenon, and they've got proof of it, physical proof. They show that you've seen the vials of the clots.
They've got jars full of them.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, and here's one from Virginia. I'm finding a lot of the white rubbery clots and have been taking pictures of them, but it's become the new normal. I don't use a drain tube anymore because of all the clots. Blood clots and fibrous white ones. My angular forceps is my go-to instrument to help remove them. And so I'm thinking about that last comment from Canada, and I said, so is the Canadian embalmer in the above thing, is he calling the guy from Virginia and the other 249 embalmers that responded to the survey this year that said they saw the white fibrous clots, is he calling all 250 of those people liars? So,
presumably this Canadian respondent was in the category that he hadn't seen any. He filled out the quantitative data as well.
Right. So I'm assuming he filled out the zeros when he said, did you see the clots? He would say no, and then what percentage of corpses he would record a zero for percentage of corpses. Strange
that he saw none and others are seeing such high percentages. That's hard to explain.
It is, isn't it? And it is hard to explain. It is. And that's why I think we need further investigation. When I take in the data, Dr. Campbell, I assume that all the embalmers are responding honestly. I don't see why they'd want to lie about something like this. It's a serious issue. So I take every response I get, whether it's a pro or a con. I take the responses and I report them as they were told to me by the embalmers.
Well, you wouldn't be a researcher if you didn't do that, Tom. You can't just report the bits you find appropriate.
Exactly. You
have to report the lot.
Yep. Next slide.
Yeah. New York.
Here's an embalmer in New York. I've seen the clots vary from case to case since the COVID shot came around. We had many young deaths, 50 to 60-year-olds, with massive heart attacks, and every one of them has had clots, as discussed in this survey. Seems many people just want to turn a blind eye to it. It's all a shame. As someone who's been around this for about 12 years, I've never seen anything like this. And this because, most of these embalmers, as we talked about in our last survey, have about 15 years of experience on average. Many of them have 20 to 30 years of experience. So they know what the blood looked like, well before the years of COVID and the vaccines.
Absolutely.
And they know how it's changed.
It'd be so interesting to know what blood vessels the blood clots were in. Were there actually blood vessels in the coronary arteries? I mean, we've no way from telling this, but
we have a little bit of insight from the People's Blood Clot survey that you and I went over about a month ago. When we asked a question about where in living people the clots are being found, it's hard, like you say, in the embalmers because the clot's being flushed out at the injection.
It's being washed out,
But in living people, the number one answer was legs, deep vein thrombosis. Number 2 was lungs. We've seen a lot of pulmonary embolisms. Number 3 was brain. Number 4 was heart. And then we had a catch-all for like eyes, nose, uterus, other areas of the body. So that's where the people, at least in the living, the clots seem to be going. So,
Ohio.
The past few years, I've seen a significantly larger percentage of clotting in almost all embalmings. These white fibrous clots are definitely unusual, having never seen them before 2021. Although not seeing the white fibrous clots or microclotting in a larger percentage of the deceased, The number of grape jelly clots has significantly increased from the years past in all decedents. So, I'm from Ohio, Dr. Campbell, and I'm going to actually tell you a little bit of a personal story here. This last Tuesday, I had to attend a funeral for my cousin. His 24-year-old daughter died, Dr. Campbell, with a brain aneurysm. Yeah.
Terrible.
Now, he had told me that she had not taken the medical intervention. But as we know that the spike protein is not just capable of helping form these white fibrous clots and the microclotting, but also as you had a discussion, I think, with Dr. Sultan some months back.
Yeah, we did.
There's the issue of vasculitis as well, the weakening of the walls of the vessel being caused by the spike protein, regardless of the source of the spike protein. So, it's possible. We can't say for sure, obviously.
Yeah, we would need a cohort of pathologists' reports to adjudicate that properly. I mean, you certainly can get fatal cerebral aneurysms in people of any age. I mean, I could have one and die today. Sometimes you simply don't know.
I looked it up in the United States here. We have about 30,000 brain aneurysms per year in the United States.
Yeah.
And that sounds like a large number, right? But in a country of 300 million people, that's actually only 1 out of every 10,000 people a year having a brain aneurysm.
Yeah.
And in her age category, somebody from 20 to 30 years old, it's only about 1/10 of that. So her odds of actually having a brain aneurysm was about 1 in 100,000. I just find it hard to believe that she beat the odds, or she was the unlucky one out of 100,000 people to get that. Yeah. I suspect that there may be something more at play here that may be spike protein related that's causing, like I said, vasculitis, clotting, etc., that can cause these. And even the father himself said that in their small circle of friends, there's been 3 young people that have died within the last 4 or 5 months. In fact, one just before our Thanksgiving over here, just about a month ago. So this is highly unusual.
So from that information, we can't really say anything about the cause, but it's, but we send our most extreme condolences to the family. It's appalling.
Yes, yeah, it was touching, and I was crying, he was crying, and it's just sad. Yeah, it's a sad thing. And one of the things I want to implore young people to do is, if you have taken the vaccine, tell your parents about it, because a lot of people, parents may not want their kids to take the vaccine, but then the child takes it because they need it for a job, or they wanted to travel, or they wanted to do volunteer work or something like that. And then if something does happen, God forbid, then it would be good for the parents to know, because Richard Hirschman has told me he has on more than one occasion, families of the deceased thought that their loved one who died was not vaccinated, but then later on they went through their belongings and they found their vaccination card. So I think it's important for your loved ones to know your status, whether you have taken the vaccine or not. I think it's important for your loved ones to know your status.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Okay. Next one.
So this is Idaho.
Idaho. Sometimes I'm given the information about if someone has had a certain vaccine. Sometimes I'm aware that they've had 5 or 6 doses of it. These are the people we are seeing with abnormal clots or a significant amount of clots. That pretty much speaks for itself. Here's one from Florida. I've seen both types of blood clots, and definitely seeing the white fibrous clots in larger numbers as time goes. These clots range anywhere from 3 to 6 inches in length, with lesser outliers in both directions. Although I do see the grape jelly and coffee, they present themselves in a much smaller number. I've been performing approximately 100 to 150 embalmings per year for the past 4 years. I presently work with 5 other embalming funeral directors who've had very much the same experience. So that's telling me, again, he's saying they're talking to each other privately about this. But
and this appears to be typical in his experience.
Yeah, not in public. And also there, he actually said something that was opposite of what the other embalmer said a few slides ago about he's seeing the grape jelly clots in less of his people. So that just tells me that, different embalmers are seeing different things. Some are seeing the clots, some are not. Some are seeing increases, some are seeing decreases, depending on where you're located.
Yeah.
Next slide.
Yeah. Arizona.
Arizona. Can't believe we're still talking about this. It's a total scam and conspiracy theory. Blood clots are caused by refrigeration when bodies are moved in and out, repeating refrigerated for a long duration before embalming. So he's saying this is all a hoax, and that the 250 that said they're seeing the clots, or if anything, it's a refrigeration phenomenon post-death.
Yeah, but you know, they have been seen in fresh bodies, and the white clots weren't seen prior to 2021.
Exactly, and in living people as well, according to my couple of whistleblowers. So,
well, we haven't got anything definitive on that.
That's right. I know the name.
Yeah, but the data we have here is definitive. That's why we want to.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
And if you look at the next, the guy in Florida, right below him says, with many embalmings I have seen these clots in, I have had to inject in multiple points.
Yeah, to flush out the circulatory system. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Both with cases refrigerated and prep done within a couple hours after death.
So that kind of contradicts, Florida kind of contradicts Arizona there, really, doesn't it?
Exactly. The next Florida guy says, seems like traditional chicken fat clots are frequently being replaced with jelly, fibrous, and microclotting. So this is also contradicts another debunking attempt by the naysayers that say that, hey, these white fibrous clots are actually just chicken fat clots. You can see this guy from Florida here, the second one. He's saying, no, chicken fat clots are one thing, fibrous clots are something different.
Yeah, the chicken fat clots are just like fat. You can put your fingers through it, but just
That's
spread
correct.
it out between finger and thumb.
Yes, they're small, they're yellowish in color, and they tear very easily. Much different than
whereas the white fibrous clots are completely different. They have tensile strength.
They're large, whitish, tough, and rubbery.
Yeah.
Hard to break.
Yeah.
So, Iowa. Very thick and large. I've had some of the whole diameter of the arteries and longer than a foot long. So this goes back to what you said in our last interview last year, that a lot of these turn out to be like a cast, right, of the vascular system.
Yeah.
Because you see the main artery and channel.
You can see the shape of the.
Right.
There were some examples last year where you could actually identify the artery it was taken from by the shape.
Yeah, exactly. You can see the tributaries running off of it. Yeah.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Next slide.
Louisiana.
This is our last slide here.
Yeah.
Louisiana. Some of these fibrous clots come out as a whole, if done carefully, that mimic the arterial system, just what we were talking about.
Yeah, like a casting thing, yeah.
Exactly. These clots are clearly the cause of demise of the decedents, but were legally labeled as heart issues, which are not typically autopsied to fully determine actual cause of death. So what he's getting into here is the question of, are these deaths being recorded properly, or is the proper cause of death being listed on death certificates? So,
important question, yeah.
And I'm in touch with
given that less postmortems, less autopsies are being done, how many diagnoses are being missed is the other question in my mind.
Right. And the next one kind of goes along with that. He says, I've had several cases in 2020 to 2023 of the white fibrous clots, and most have had COVID listed as a factor on their death certificates. However, in each case, the family did not know if the decedent was vaccinated.
Yeah.
So, but I do know, Dr. Campbell, there was a monetary incentive to list COVID as the cause of death. Here in the United States, for example, I believe families got around $13,000 that they could apply to the funeral of a loved one if that death was coded as COVID. And we know hospitals made money when deaths were coded as COVID. We know the funeral homes are they know they're going to get paid for the funeral if the death is listed as COVID. So to me, there was a lot of incentive out there to list deaths as COVID when maybe there was something else that was at play here.
And the risk of overdiagnosis from the oversensitivity of the PCR test sometimes.
Right. The very last comment is from another Florida embalmer. Unusual clots has changed since COVID vaccine. I only took 2 Pfizer, refused to take booster nor vaccine again. And we've had multiple comments like this from other embalmers. They themselves see what's going on and they're scared.
Yeah.
So, I saw one of your recent videos, Dr. Campbell, that you talked about integrity or the lack of it with our public officials and how they need to step up and do a better job.
Yeah,
I'm asking
standards in public life, the Nolan principles.
Exactly. I'm asking the funeral directors, embalmers, vascular surgeons, cardiologists, endovascular specialists to do the same thing, to step up, show integrity, let us know what you're seeing or not seeing in both the dead and the living. Because this is important, right? These people are the only ones that see what's going on inside veins and arteries. So if they don't tell us what's going on, we don't know. We're in the blind.
It's true. Yeah. The embalmers are, in a sense, the guardians of the vascular system in death.
Right.
Yeah,
exactly.
Because otherwise, it's basically not looked at. And
I also want to make a plea to the media people as well. About 3 months ago, I actually traveled to Hershey, Pennsylvania, and I met Tucker Carlson at Hershey in person, handed him a vial of the clots, also handed his producer Samantha a vial of the clots as well, and asked them to please put me on their show to talk about this very important topic, especially since we know that a fourth of the corpses seem to have the microclotting and the white fibrous clots in them. So I have not heard from them yet, but I implore them to put me on their show as well. So if you can do anything, get with your friend Russell Brand or any contacts you have, Dr. Campbell, I would appreciate that, because we need to get this out and you've done a terrific job. Our video that we did last year, interview together, got 2.1 million views, and it's got over 27,000 comments to that video that we did earlier this year about the results of last year's survey. So I can't thank you enough, because that was probably the major vehicle for getting this information out there.
No, you've done all the survey work. You've done the legwork on this, Tom.
Well, and it's important work because, like I said, we're seeing the clots in such prevalent numbers, and then we know that Big Pharma is not stopping. Moderna recently got approval for an RSV vaccine that's mRNA based for the elderly. Now, what's interesting is they just failed to get it approved for infants because it did so poorly in the trials. So if I was a person that was an elderly person, I'd be a little nervous right now if I've taken Moderna's mRNA vaccine that was approved for me, but not for infants.
Yeah, so, let me think if I'm going to get it. No, I'm not.
And, they don't just have that plan for us. They have shots for shingle, bird flu, regular flu. Moderna's got about 40 of these things in the pipeline.
Big plans.
Yeah.
New factories all around the world.
And a scientific team that myself and Richard Hirschman have been in contact with believe that there's strong evidence. They're still working on it. But they believe that the spike protein is not only a problem, but also possibly the lipid nanoparticle. It's a problem as well.
Yeah, the lipid nanoparticle itself. And the fact that it's a different... suppose it's respiratory syncytial virus, mRNA vaccine, for example. Okay, the spike protein is probably particularly toxic, but the point is we know the systemic distribution of the lipid nanoparticles. And then you will get a cell expressing RSV antigen on its surface, respiratory syncytial virus components on its surface. And as a result of that, the lymphocytes will destroy that cell wherever it is. So we don't want foreign proteins popping up on the surface of our cells in our coronary arteries or cerebral arteries.
Correct.
So the actual spike protein, maybe it's particularly bad, but any vaccine, inverted commas, genetic preparation that causes antigen to appear with systemic distribution that is going to attract the attention of killing cytotoxic lymphocytes, to me is a bit of a suspect idea.
And the team that we're in touch with also believes that the phospholipid nanoparticle, at the moment that it actually opens up to release its modified RNA payload, may be actually it exposes then its phosphorus heads that are in the phospholipid nanoparticle. We believe that has a negative charge to it. We believe it may be having an affinity for our natural fibrinogen that's produced by our liver, that protein that's important to the clotting process.
It could be causing blood clots.
Yeah, it could be causing this strange polymer, these white fibrous clots, as opposed to letting the fibrinogen convert normally into fibrin. And there's been various tests that they've done that they're pointing to that. They did an ICP-MS analysis recently.
I haven't got a clue. What is it?
S stands for inductively coupled plasma mass mass spectrometry analysis.
Oh, so it's an
Basically,
analysis of the blood plasma, right?
yeah, it identifies the elemental composition of the sample in terms of the periodic table. And what they did is they sent samples of the white fibrous clots to 2 different universities, and they verified what Mike Adams, the health ranger, had found in his analysis several years ago, that there was very little of our natural blood elements of magnesium, potassium, and iron in the white fibrous clots.
Quite a lot of amyloid protein.
Right. Yeah.
Pathological protein.
Yeah. Normal blood, for example, contains 450 parts per million of iron. In the clots, it was only 20 parts per million, much less.
But you'd expect that because they're white. If they contain the iron, they would be a rusty colour.
Exactly. Now, to the contrary, so we know it's not blood coagulating. Is what the conclusion there is. What they did find was high amounts of elements like potassium and tin and sulfur, which is very interesting. In normal blood, for example, phosphorus is only about 100 parts per million, but in the clots it was 5,000 parts per million. So what the lead scientist did is he went back and looked at the ingredients to the medical interventions, and he saw that they have, in the lipid nanoparticles, they are, like I said, phospholipid nanoparticles. They contain large amounts of phosphorus.
Yeah, well, all cells are phospholipid bilayers, so anytime you got disruption to the cell membranes, that would make sense.
Right, and ATP, for example, right, is phosphorus.
Well, ATP is inside the cell. It's inside the cytoplasm of the cell, inside the cytosol, whereas the phospholipid membrane surrounds the outside of the cell, and indeed surrounds the nucleus of the cell.
So, but that led him to a theory that he thought maybe at the moment, like I said, the lipid nanoparticle is opening and those phosphorus heads are exposed, that it could be binding with our natural fibrinogen. So instead of converting properly into fibrin in a proper clot, it's being basically turning it into an amyloid, a misshaped or misfolded protein, right? That then becomes hard to break down. One of the things that led them to believe this, Dr. Campbell, is they did another analysis called an HPLC analysis. It's a high-performance liquid chromatography analysis. This basically identifies the amount of compounds in the sample. And, fibrinogen in its liquid state, when it combines to become fibrin, you can think of it basically as 3 ropes. There's an alpha, beta, and gamma chain that are smaller ropes, and they intertwine to form a stronger rope of fibrin. Well, and that's usually in a 1-to-1-to-1 ratio. But when they examined these white fibrous clots, they didn't find that ratio at all. They found the fibrinogen beta chain in 36% of the white fibrous clot was the fibrinogen beta chain, 16% of the white fibrous clot is the fibrinogen gamma chain, and only 4% is the alpha chain.
So it's very strange fibrin then.
Yeah, so what that is confirmation to them that something's happening and altering the normal process of fibrinogen converting to fibrin. That instead you're getting this bizarre polymer with instead of a 1-to-1-to-1 ratio, you have basically a 9-to-4-to-1 ratio.
Well, let's hope this comes out in the peer-reviewed literature pretty soon, so we can make a more objective evaluation. But there's certainly some interesting hypotheses there that we hope the biochemists are working on.
Well, the last test they did, Dr. Campbell, is what's called a thioflavin T test. And that tests for amyloid, the presence of amyloid. And they also did a Congo red staining as well. But they did this, thioflavin T is thought to be more conclusive. And they recently did a test on the white fibrous clots on that and did find under a fluorescent microscope that it lit up green, which is an indication that the clot material is indeed amyloid protein, misfolded fibrinogen, possibly aberrant proteins from that the other theory we've talked about in the past, the frame shifting, the ribosomes misreading the modified RNA and creating these nonsense proteins as well. So we think that the clots may be composed of these. And that actually dovetails very closely with Dr. Risa Pretorius' work in South Africa. She has several papers published where she has confirmed through thioflavin T testing that the microclots are made of amyloid material. So we weren't surprised to see the white fibrous clots, which we think are just macroclots.
That's surprising because the dirty blood clots, the microclotting, are red.
Well, we think at some point that the iron that's in there, that the red corpuscles that may be trapped in there, kind of condense out of the clot. And not all the clots, if you notice, are totally white either. Some of them are kind of tan in color or kind of pinkish in color. So they may contain some red blood cells that are trapped in there as well.
Yeah.
But what's interesting, like I said, is her microclotting thioflavin T test detected presence of amyloid. So we were not surprised that the thioflavin T we ran on the white fibrous clots also detected amyloid material.
I think the important thing is that these white clots are available. The embalmers do have samples of them, and pathology laboratories are free to ask nicely.
That's exactly where I wanted to go with what you're saying. This team was a kind of an unprofessional, put together team of polymer chemists and others, but there's no reason that universities out there can't do the same test that we're the
Go to your local embalmers and say, please, sir, can I have some of your white clots?
Yes, absolutely, Dr. Campbell. So that's all I'm asking for. I would like to see universities and the authorities do these same type of tests and see what kind of results they get.
Publish in definitive peer-reviewed journals, and then we could put it on the channel.
Absolutely.
We'd have some firm data to base it on.
Exactly. Yep.
Tom, thanks for all your hard work. Is impressive. What's the next stage?
The next stage is report the results of this survey to the CDC, NIH, and FDA. I'll probably report it twice, Dr. Campbell. I'll probably report it in the next week or so to them, but then I'll also resubmit it in late January or early February after the new administration's taken place, just to make sure that the information gets to them. Because, like I said, I've been disappointed the last 2 years. The FDA, CDC, and NIH have never responded to these embalmer surveys. So I want to make sure that the next administration gets it in their hands.
Yep. I'm optimistic that we're going to know a lot more next year than we do this year. But for now, Major Tom Haviland, as always, thank you for your hard work and thank you for coming on.
Thanks, Dr. Campbell.